Hi everyone, Janelle here. I'm a functional nutritionist and doctor of natural medicine. This is my podcast where we talk about midlife wellness in the mountains. Today I sat down and had an incredible talk with Alexa Hasman. Alexa has her master's in both exercise science and sports psychology and works as a coach for uphill athlete. If you are in midlife and want to keep playing hard in the mountains, you're going to want to listen to this talk as we go over Alexa's formula for training smarter in midlife. Welcome, everybody, and welcome, Alexa. I am super pumped to have you here to talk about training smart in the mountains and, in particular, for women. So, thank you so much for being here.
No, thanks for having me. This is my favorite topic, so I'm excited.
Yay. Me too. Okay, I told you earlier, but I did train with Uphill Athlete for an ultra I did in Silverton a few years ago, and I was so blown away by how incredible I felt and how fast I recovered and how actually easy it made some of my steep long runs. So I love that. And we all know that movement is a pillar of health, and most of the people who listen here like to play in the mountains. But moving smart is so important when we want healthy hormones, which are really our primary indicator of overall health. So I'd say training smart is important for everybody. It's especially important for women with fluctuating hormones. And then training smart is exponentially important at midlife as our hormones go wild and then eventually drop. So, to start us off, can you tell us what training smart means to you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, training smart means a lot of things to me, but I think my overall rule that I use with my clients is very simple, and that is risk versus reward, right? And what I mean by risk versus reward is as athletes, we want to go out and do all the things, right? We want to be hammering the mountains. We want to be, just doing everything we can. And at some point, we got to take a step back and say, is this more of a risk to my body or is it more of a reward? So anything that my athletes do, I want them to think about, is this going to be beneficial or is this going to be detrimental? So it's a balance of how to fit everything in intelligently so that our training isn't overdoing it or underdoing it, right? So it's a really fine balance. And the biggest part about that is listening to our body and reading off of the cues and not pushing past certain things. We want to push back some of the fatigue, right? Like it's not like, oh, I'm a little sore, I'm a little tired. Should I train? Maybe I shouldn't train today. No, I mean, that's okay. But we're talking about like, especially in midlife when we have these hormone fluctuations and we're getting extremely fatigued or stuff like that, joint pain, those are the times to say, hey, am I putting myself more at risk to push through this and train through this? Or am I going to get a reward of beneficial training adaptation? And in that situation, there's more risk, in my opinion.
I love that clarification. So I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, am I hearing you say like this reward versus risk? It sort of makes me think about people who go, train, and are only focused on performance in that moment versus health. So it's like, are we going for health overall? Like, is this contributing to our health, or are we just hammering and costing our health for our performance? So is that sort of like what you're saying?
Completely. Or like just fitting it all in because our lives are so busy.
Yeah.
And as we're aging, because we're all aging, things are not going to be performing quite the same, and we still want to fit it in the same, and it just doesn't work like that, right? Our body doesn't
Mm,
respond the same way, so we
mhm,
have to adapt to that, and we have to listen to our body's cues
mm,
on like, okay, is this going to be beneficial to my future performance, or am I
mm.
going to set myself back? If I'm feeling a little run down right now and I push through that, I'm setting myself up to get sick, get injured, get even more fatigued, and that's when the risk is too much, right? So fitting in all of our life stuff and all the stuff that our body is going through on top of training.
I love that I've heard you say twice now, listen to your body. I mean, that's definitely a huge thing that I teach women how to do. So I love that that's so important to you also, and that you're really emphasizing that from the get-go. So thank you for that. Okay, so what are some of the signs then that a woman isn't training smart, or anyone, but since most of the people here are women, what are some of those signs that they're not training smart, that they're overdoing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing is fatigue, right? When you're so tired all day that it's hard to function, that's a cue. When you're stopping at Starbucks 3 times a day, that's a cue. 2 times, fine. That's what I do. But 3 times, you just have to listen. Like, is this extreme? Is this unusual for me? I think is the biggest thing. Do I feel unusually tired, unusually fatigued?
Okay, so like, how are you recovering after
Yeah,
the?
exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Anything else? So fatigue. Uh,
Extreme muscle soreness is a common one that I hear about. Like, like I said, it's okay to be a little bit sore, but if this is out of the normal for you, like I am extremely sore and it's not going away, all right, well, then let's step back a little bit. Let's think about what we're doing. Let's adjust a little bit to our plan. That's another really big one that I see coming up. Yeah, and then just overall not feeling well,
mm,
right? So body aches, headaches, all that stuff. That's always an indicator of we need to dial back, and this isn't the time to push through.
I love that. And then I'll have to add, I don't know if you agree, but I would definitely say like losing your period if you're a menstruating
Oh my
woman
gosh.
and you
Yes,
lose your period. Like to me, that's a cycle that health is not happening and that we need
absolutely.
to reevaluate that plan.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Such a good add-on.
Okay, so that's great. So those are things to look for. Through your lens, what things do women need to consider in regard to cycles and training? Anything like I know there's a million things we could do a whole podcast on that, but like just a couple things that come to mind with our cycles and how we're training.
Yeah, are you meaning like mostly menstrual cycles or
Yeah,
life cycles?
exactly. No, so first menstrual cycles, since most people in perimenopause are still menstruating,
Yeah.
maybe irregularly, but yeah. So first that.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing to know about training with menstrual cycles is that there's a lot that is out there about training with specificity to your training cycle. And when it comes down to it, the science is really nuanced and really minimal when it comes to changing your training in regards to your cycle. And that being said, the training, or not training, the scientific evidence on it is very small groups of women. And we all know as women that everybody's cycle is very different. We experience it completely different. So some people are going to get super fatigued before, some are going to get fatigued after. I get really bad migraines afterwards, some get them before. All of our symptoms are so different. And so when we change our training based off our cycle, one, we're doing it based off of the evidence of a small group of people. And two, it's in these really minuscule changes. So what we suggest you do is listen and track how your body specifically responds to your menstrual cycle. So again, like for me as an example, I get really bad migraines. I know I can't train as well the few days after my cycle, my period. So I will choose to be like, all right, let's try to not plan long days then because I don't feel great. And then the people that have that symptom beforehand are going to plan for that. So really tracking what is happening with your specific cycle is what I always suggest.
I love that. I think that's so great. I find so many people trying to be so dogmatic about exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and then that's not even true for them. So
Mm.
I think that's great. And so what I heard you say is that what people should do who are menstruating is just track. So, and I definitely recommend women do that in so many different areas, but track how you feel, track what's true for you. I found out that during my luteal phase, when progesterone was higher, that I just needed to snack more on my runs. I needed to bring more carbs with me. So instead of beating myself up, I was just like, okay, that's my body during that phase. And so I just threw some extra food in my pockets at that time. So
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're right. People will discover all sorts of different things that are true for them. And the other thing true for me is right before my period, I feel horrible. That's like the
Yeah.
worst is if I see a race and I'm like, oh shit, it's happening right before my period. So anything interesting about you that you know about your body?
Yeah, when you say snacking, I'm the same way. Like, I'll always know, like, craving sugar, like right before. I'm like, I want all the sweets, and then yeah, afterwards the migraines. And so I just listen to those cues. Like, okay, I
Hmm.
want more sugar. That's okay.
Hmm.
That
Right.
our bodies are really smart, and they give us cues because we know what we want and what we need. Right. Of course,
Hmm.
we lose some of that along the way with like processing and food and stuff like that, and changes and all that stuff. But we still, our bodies are smart. So listening to
Hmm.
them is going to be the best way to get clues of how to,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So,
Hmm.
yeah, if you get achy joints around your menstrual cycle, that's a cue. Like, listen to that. And
Hmm.
also remember that there are phases of our life where that our bodies are giving those clues because it's true. Our ligaments become more pliable during different parts of our menstrual cycle or different parts of our life cycles. So our clues in our body and how we're reacting to this are because it's actually happening. It's not just like, oh, my body is just having this weird reaction to my
Hmm.
menstrual cycle. There's hormones, there's things going on in your body that are creating this. So
Yeah, I love that message. So is there a place that you like women track? Like, is there an app or a tool or something, or are you just like, whatever?
I've tried several apps, and I'm just so bad at tracking my own. But I think the one that I have on my phone is like Mood or something like that. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's really good because I could track. Because I was forever wondering, like, am I getting migraines because of my cycle, or is it something else? And so that was a really good way to track all of
Mhm.
the symptoms and when my cycle was coming up. And it was nice because it would tell me, oh, this is what phase you're in right now. This is what you should be expecting in the next few days based off of your history.
The one I've tried that I like, I used to use Fitter Athlete or Fitter Woman, and then I now love my Aura Ring. So I can just kind of like make little notes there and track everything on that. So I love that one too. But there's
That's
so many great apps out there now, which is just so cool. Things are changing so fast in this department, which is just awesome.
Yeah, and I think most any of these tracking apps are gonna let you track your symptoms and stuff like that. And that's amazing to know about the Aura Ring. I didn't know that you could track that stuff with that. So that's great to know. I
Yeah,
used to have
totally.
the Whoop, and I don't know if it was, I guess it was a little intuitive with that, but I don't know if as much.
Yeah. Okay, so I recently heard you give a talk on the Uphill Athlete Instagram page, and that's how I knew that I had to get you here. And so, through your lens, since this is, a lot of midlife women, what do you think we need to consider, or just like a few things we need to consider in perimenopause if we want to keep playing hard? So things
Yeah,
change. Like that is
yeah.
inevitable. Things change, it gets wonky, but what do you recommend?
Number one, across all stages of life, but especially in perimenopause and menopause, is strength training.
Mm,
Right? Number one thing you can do is strength train. And that means with resistance. And resistance, I mean weights, or if you want bands or something like that, but something that's going to add some resistance. And that's because of not only because we're losing muscle mass, and honestly, quite rapidly, but we're also losing bone density. Uh, and all of these things are easily, not easily, but they can be uh, fixed a little bit with strength training, right? So I always call it like an uphill battle for uphill athletes when it comes to perimenopause and menopause and strength training. You're losing muscle mass, but you have to work at it as you're losing it. Because think about if you're not, it's going to be that much worse. When we lose 10% of our muscle mass in just perimenopause, and that is a massive amount of muscle mass. So we need to be on top of that. We need to be strength training, and we need to be strength training more than we have been. So that's the number one thing. Next up is mobility and keeping our joints healthy. So our joints are going to get stiffer, our joints aren't going to be as lubricated, and we need to be making sure that we are moving correctly. And that means working through mobility, right? So I know that that's not the fun part of training. Trust me, I get that. I hate doing mobility work, but it is so important. And I can tell you from experience, if you don't work on it, it's gonna come back to bite you, because mobility is how our body functions through movement, right? So if your shoulders aren't mobile, your hips aren't going to move correctly, your ankles aren't going to move correctly. It's all of our body parts are connected. So as much as like a lot of our uphill athletes want to focus on lower body mobility, we got to focus on the upper body mobility just as much.
Yeah, I
Those
love
are
that you said all of our parts are connected, because that's like a big core principle about functional nutrition anyway. Just like everything matters, it all matters, and it's all connected. So that's so true. I love that you brought that in for thinking about mobility and strength. And those were definitely the two that I changed the most. It's funny because my husband's been a runner forever and he's super tight. And but he's worked so much on mobility in the last few years, and I used to be a yoga teacher, but I don't do any mobility. And so now he's like totally kicking my ass in that department, and he squats every night and does, and he's like, you got to do this. And I'm like, oh man, you can't just have done it before and it counts. Like you actually have to do it.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. And it's hard because again, it's not the fun part of training. It's not that, you're not out in the mountains. It's not pretty. Uh it's not fun. It's necessary.
So necessary. Okay, so you talked about strength, you talked about mobility, and can you just add like what some of the other components of training smart are, how you coach?
Sure. Yeah, eating. Eating is number one. We want to make sure that we're fueling enough. I think that's a really big issue for women, is that we feel like this societal need to underfuel. I see that so often with my athletes, and gosh, if I just want to just be like, you don't understand. Like, the more you eat, the better you're going to feel, the better you're going to perform. It just all ties in to each other. And then body care is another one that I think is really important, making sure that we're taking baths, that we're getting massages if we can do that, or if we can't, using foam rollers or uh, massage guns, making sure that we're taking that time to go through and work on our bodies, because our bodies are going through a lot. And then another one that I suffer from not doing enough of is breathing, right?
Mm.
Like calming that mind down and meditating if you can, just getting some breath work in, because that's life, right? Breath work.
Yeah, those are all so important. And I love that you brought up eating and underfueling, because I find that working with women in midlife, as everything shifts and things that used to work don't work and they're gaining weight, that's their go-to, is to train harder and eat less. And that's like the worst thing. That's like the worst formula. And like injuries happen and your metabolism gets all messed up. And it's like exactly the opposite of what they think. So I agree. I think that one is so important. Is just like, especially if you are playing in the mountains, like you've got to eat.
Yes, we used to get a lot of people wanting to do fasted training, and for women, like, just absolutely no,
Hmm.
absolutely no.
Hmm.
Let's just not do that, because that is
Hmm.
just going to mess up your hormones so much, and you need fuel to function, and you
Hmm.
need fuel to function well and perform the way that we want to perform in the mountains. So absolutely, food is our fuel out there. So
Hmm. 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 Great. Okay, so can you speak into, do you coach around like zone 2 training and like the base? Is that part of your jam or what?
yeah, yeah. So uphill athlete, we focus a lot on zone 2 training. That's the basis of everything, right? But that doesn't mean we don't play into zone 3 and maybe even zone 4 a little bit. And that's one of the big things that's also really important for perimenopause and menopause, postmenopausal women, is to do a little bit more higher intensity than our male counterparts are doing, because of our metabolism and hormones. There's just scientific evidence to prove that just a little bit more of that upper respiratory like action, that anaerobic work, will help with our hormones a little bit more. So we try to include that too. So it's not just plain we're in zone two all the time, but we're including a little bit of that zone three, zone four, especially for women in midlife.
Yeah, I love that. And but you're not talking about like going out every day at zone 3 or zone 4. And why don't we just rewind for 1 second? Can you just
Yeah.
like give everyone a brief description of like what zone 2 is, what
Yeah.
zone 3 plus is?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, zone two is what we consider to be a conversational pace. This is something where you could read the paragraph of a novel to your friend and not be breathless, right? It's like an all day pace. And it's also that pace that we often don't train in when we are using conventional training patterns because we are used to this go big or go home mentality. And when we do the go big or go home mentality, which is going into zone four, zone five, then we're setting ourselves up to be overdoing it to the point where our body cannot recover, right? That, and we're going into more of burning through our muscle, all that stuff. When we're in zone two, we're in that fat burning zone, but also we're working in that aerobic zone where we're building an aerobic base. We're teaching our body how to utilize fat really well, and we're not breaking down our body as fast. So then zone three and zone four are those upper areas where you're starting to get a little bit breathless and it's getting a little bit harder to breathe, to talk. Like I always say, like with zone four, zone five, if somebody talks to you, you want to say like one word and it's probably not a very nice word, right? So that's what those upper ends are going to be.
So then when you're speaking into adding some of that in for midlife women,
Mhm.
like can you just clarify like timing wise again? Like you're
Yeah.
not saying every day doing that, but instead this like polarized approach. So can you speak into
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first you want to make sure you have a base first before you even get into that, right? And then when you do include it, you want to include it maybe one time a week,
Hmm.
right? In little tiny bursts. And when I mean like getting into those upper zones, we're talking 10, 30 seconds, and that's it. And maybe 8 times in that workout. So we're not going out and we're at the end of this run on our hands and knees, crawling to our car. That is absolutely not what we want to do. That's counterproductive to all of our goals. So staying in that zone two, you should finish your run and feel like, all right, I feel okay still. We joke about uphill athlete. A lot of the athletes joke that it feels awkward when you're out on the trails and people are like busting past you and they're breathing hard. And you're like, well, I'm in zone two. I swear I'm still
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. We need to make
thanks.
those t-shirts that are like zone
Yeah.
2, intentional.
Exactly. Yeah, because it feels awkward. You're like, well, I should be out there breathing super hard and like, rocking it up this hill. But no, you shouldn't. So yeah, keep that in mind.
Yeah, I like having experienced this, I really was just so mind blown at how this works and how you can increase the speed that you can be in zone 2 when you use that methodology. How you can, when you do that explosive and you do the strength and you do the mobility and the base, how you can really work not as hard at these levels. That it's so cool. So that's what I meant when I said like it made my longer runs easier over time, not right away. Like that takes time, right? And working that way. But I really love that. And then for me, as someone who works with so many women in perimenopause, we become so sensitive to cortisol in midlife and our blood sugar, our adrenals, our stress, and all of this. And I find that marrying these two, philosophies, theories is just so powerful when we can help women train so that it's not so stressful on their body, like that cortisol, that constant cortisol um,
Yeah.
response, where it's strategic, it's methodical, and it works. And
Mhm.
especially on our midlife bodies, if we want to keep playing hard, like if people want to just tone it down, that's fine too, of course, like no pressure. But if you want to keep playing hard, I do so believe in exactly what you coach and what you have so much education and experience around. So I just
Yeah.
can't shout your praises enough.
Oh,
And
thanks. No, and
yeah,
I completely echo that. I mean, you see so many midlife women that are hitting those, 1 hour workouts really hard and they're
yeah,
not seeing results and they're getting injured and they're getting sick and then they have to take a month off. And it's so frustrating because you just want to be like, that was just not the right way to do it. You're not going to get the results that you want to get. So,
right.
yeah, train easier, train smarter. That's the way to go with training.
So,
Yep.
I just think it's so much fun. It feels good and it's fun. It just takes an adjustment and a shift.
Yeah.
So,
Patience. It takes patience.
patience.
Mhm.
Yes, exactly. Um, so what about like, do you see anything around like motivation or the stories that women tell themselves or like things, a narrative that holds them back or anything? Because I know you work with so many women. Is that ever true for the women you work with?
Oh my gosh, I think every single person has, their blocks, right? Is what I would consider them. Like, well, I'm too old is the most common one I get with women. And it's so interesting. And I always say, I never hear my men say that. I never hear my male clients say that. Not a single one of them is like, well, I'm 45, I can't do this. They're all like, I'm 45, I'm going to do this. And then you get the female athletes and they're like, well, I'm 45, I don't know, I just can't do this. And I just think it's such an interesting dynamic that we are sort of taught that when we become 40, it almost feels like our life is supposed to end and we can't do anything. In reality, I feel like it's just the beginning of our athletic careers. And so I think that obviously it can be really hard to go through menopause and perimenopause and all that stuff. But when we train right and we train smart, we can actually make it feel a lot better than if we're not training correctly, right? So I just wish that women understood that age isn't a limiting factor in what we're doing, right? Our life does not need to end.
I love that message. And I just thought when you said that, when you said, I can't do it, I'm 45 or whatever the story is, maybe the story is, I can't do it how I used to do it.
Oh my
That's the
gosh.
story.
Yes.
So what are the new tools? Bring it on. Like let's do it a new way and let's keep rocking
Mhm.
it out.
Yeah, we have to adjust. That's the biggest thing. We can't do it how we did it when we were 20, and we shouldn't do it how we did it when we were 20. And so what I always say is we are where we are now. We
Mm.
cannot look back at what we did. I can't look back and be like, oh, I used to run the 400 at this speed. I mean, I'm never going to do that again. So why even compare myself to that? I am where I am now. I am where I am 2 kids later,
Mm.
several years later, but also with a lot more knowledge and a lot more wisdom and intelligence with how I train. And so there's so much power in that. And I think that's the superpower of women is that we have a wealth of maturity and knowledge and intelligence once we get into midlife.
Yeah, amen, girl. I love that. We have so much more wisdom and hopefully we just give a shit less what other people say. So or
Yes.
think. You know what I mean? So I think it's like a double awesomeness. But I think that's great. So if there was one thing, and it's fine if it's something you've already said, that you would love all women to really understand about training well, training smart in midlife, and to align with hormones, what would it be?
Strength training is not going to make you bulky. It is not going to make you look like a power lifter unless you're doing it to specifically look like a power lifter, and those people have to work really hard to look like that. So lifting weights is going to be beneficial to you. Don't be scared of it. Really embrace it. It's actually a lot of fun and it's going to make you feel amazing.
That's a great message. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So if people want to find you, where can they find you, Alexa?
Yeah, at uphillathlete.com, or on Instagram at Alexa Hasman.
Great. Okay, awesome. Everyone go find her. She's amazing. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all of your wisdom. I am so grateful.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. That's it for this week. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a comment and a review as that helps it reach more people. You can find me and the courses I teach, the Midlife Hormone Club and the Energy Club, online at Mountain Rebalance. I help midlife women understand their body and age better. If that sounds like you, please join my newsletter. And if there's a topic you'd like me to cover here or an expert you want me to have on, let me know. In the meantime, keep playing, and here's to aging our best.